Most people don't notice the moment their awakening begins. It almost never arrives with lightning, visions, or dramatic revelations. Instead, it begins quietly with a number, a pattern, a subtle nudge in the fabric of your daily life. And for millions of people around the world, that pattern begins with 3:33. Maybe it started innocently for you. You check your phone in the middle of the night, 3:33 a.m. You glanced at the microwave, 3:33. A receipt total showed 3.33. You began seeing it everywhere, in places too strange and too precise to ignore. At first, your logical mind dismissed it. It's nothing, just coincidence. But the feeling that followed wasn't logical. It was visceral, a sudden chill, a strange heaviness in the air, a sense of being observed, guided, or warned. Every time the number appeared, a part of you whispered, "Pay attention." David Icke often speaks about how awakening doesn't happen around you, it happens within you. And when the internal shift begins, the external world rearranges itself to get your attention. Synchronicities are reality's first language. Numbers are its second. And 333 is not just any number. It is one of the oldest, most universal activation signals across every mystical tradition on earth. But why does it show up now? Why you? Why at this point in your life? Because here is the truth that ancient initiates knew. 333 only appears when your consciousness crosses a threshold you're not aware of yet. It is a sign that your perception is rising faster than your mind can understand. And the number repeats itself because the message is too important to risk you missing it. When the soul begins to shift, the world begins to echo. Think of 333 as a knock on the door of your perception. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, a triple pulse, a triple reminder, a triple awakening. In numerology, the number 3 is creation. In sacred geometry, it represents the trinity of consciousness: mind, body, spirit. In ancient Egyptian teachings, 3 is the number of divine alignment. In Gnostic texts, triple numbers mark moments when the physical and non-physical overlap. And in Tibetan mysticism, 333 is known as the gate hour, the moment when the veil is at its thinnest. When triple numbers repeat, it means the message is not symbolic, it is urgent. Many cultures believe that 333 appears when a person's inner frequency rises above the collective field, meaning you've begun to slip out of the unconscious patterns that keep most of the world asleep. You might not realize it consciously, but your energy field has started shifting, clearing old emotions, shedding old identities, dissolving old illusions. And that's why 333 appears to mark the moment your soul begins breaking through its old boundaries. Some people feel restless when it appears. Some feel watched. Some feel protected. Some feel an overwhelming sense of déjà vu, like 333 is reminding them of something they forgot long ago. But beneath every reaction lies the same truth. When you see 333, your awakening has already begun. It is not a prediction, it is confirmation. It is the first crack in the matrix, the first signal that your subconscious is stirring, the first clue that the version of yourself you've known is dissolving to make space for the one you were always meant to become. And whether you realize it or not, the moment you notice 333, your life begins to shift. The question is whether you'll listen or look away. Long before digital clocks existed, long before electricity, time zones, or modern calendars, ancient civilizations were already obsessed with repeating threes. To them, 333 was not a time, it was a signal, a code, a doorway in consciousness. They believed that numbers were not mathematical markers, but vibrational messages woven into reality itself, and none carried more significance than the 333. Every ancient culture, even those separated by oceans, language, and thousands of years, interpreted 33 inches almost the exact same way. A moment when the physical world weakens and another realm presses close enough to be felt. Let's go back thousands of years. Egypt, the hour of the third light. Egyptian priests believed every human lived under three lights: the physical light, the inner light, and the hidden light. The hidden light was the most powerful, they said. It came alive at 3:33, when the soul was most receptive. They taught initiates that if you wake at 3:33 a.m., it means your hidden light is calling you, trying to pull you toward a truth you've forgotten. This belief became so powerful that certain temples were only entered during this third light hour. Not midday, not sunrise, only this one window. Why? Because the priest said, at 3:33, the veil stops breathing. Sumer, the first written record, the Sumerians left cuneiform tablets describing the triple mark, a pattern that appeared before great transformations for individuals and societies. They believed that when a person repeatedly saw 3:33, it meant they had been selected by the unseen ones to receive insight, guidance, or protection. The Sumerian symbol for 3:33 literally translates to the gate knock 3 times. Sound familiar? In the Kabbalah, the number of revelation, in Kabbalistic mysticism, 3 represents the 3 worlds of human experience. The world of form, the world of thought, the world of spirit. When these layers align, the initiate enters what they called the corridor, a moment when messages flow directly from the higher world into the human mind. 333 or 333 was considered the purest alignment, the moment when the corridor is wide open. Kabbalists warn their students, when 333s appear, listen, something is speaking to you. Tibet, the gate hour between dream and astral. In Tibetan mysticism, 3:33 a.m. is the most energetically sensitive moment of the night. Monks trained for years to remain awake during this window because they believed intuitive abilities were strongest when the world was silent and the ego was weak. They taught that if you wake at 3:33, without an obvious reason, you are being called to the gate. To them, this wasn't superstition, it was a direct spiritual initiation, the connecting thread across all of history. How did Egypt, Sumer, Kabbalah, Tibet, the Mayans, and the Greeks all interpret 3:33 as a doorway despite never communicating with one another? Because they weren't studying numbers, they were studying consciousness. They observed that people who saw repeating threes often became more intuitive, made life-changing decisions, awakened spiritually detached from illusions, sensed hidden truths. Others couldn't. They realized that 333 shows up during moments when a person is preparing consciously or unconsciously to break out of the collective trance. It is a sign that your soul is no longer asleep, that something inside you is rising, that the shift has begun. This is why ancient cultures guarded the meaning of 333 so fiercely. They knew the power behind it wasn't mathematical, it was transformational. Now the question becomes, why is your soul showing it to you? There is a moment, invisible to the eye, but unmistakable to the soul, when your inner world starts to vibrate differently. You don't choose it consciously, you don't plan it. It doesn't come through effort, meditation, or spiritual practices. It happens quietly, naturally, like a seed awakening underground long before it breaks through the soil. That moment is when 333 begins appearing. Most people think awakening is dramatic. They imagine visions, out-of-body experiences, angels descending, cosmic messages written across the sky. But the truth is far more subtle, far more intimate. Awakening begins with the slightest shift in your frequency, a shift so delicate that if reality didn't send a signal, you would sleep through it. 333 is that signal. David Icke often says your energy changes before your mind understands why. That's exactly what happens here. Your consciousness starts to rise, not through effort, but because the environment of your inner world is no longer compatible with who you used to be. Old beliefs loosen. Old wounds surface. Old limitations begin to crack. You find yourself questioning things you once accepted. You sense truths you can't explain. You feel something coming long before you know what it is. This is the frequency shift, the moment your entire being recalibrates. And when that shift begins, reality reacts. The matrix glitch effect. Modern scientists talk about pattern recognition, but ancient mystics describe something much deeper. When your consciousness rises, the simulation you live in becomes slightly unstable. Not dangerous, just more transparent. You begin to see patterns that were always there but hidden behind the noise of daily life. Repeating numbers, synchronicities, strange déjà vu, meaningful coincidences. The world begins winking at you, not metaphorically, but energetically. 333 appears because your frequency is rising faster than the illusion can mask. You are no longer aligned with the unconscious field that governs most of humanity. Your vibration has stepped outside the collective signal, and the universe responds with a new message. You're waking up. The inner realignment, as your frequency rises, your intuition sharpens. You start feeling things before they happen. You sense people's intentions without them speaking. You get emotional impulses that don't feel random, they feel guided. You experience sudden clarity about situations you've struggled with for years. This is not imagination. This is perception expanding. Your mind is no longer filtering your reality through old programming. The fog lifts. You see more, feel more, understand more. And the number 333 appears as confirmation that the shift is real. Ancient teachers believe that when someone's consciousness starts vibrating above the ordinary human field, reality sends signals because the person has crossed into a new timeline. A higher one, a more aligned one that requires awakening, the beginning of detachment. Have you noticed that when 333 starts appearing, things in your life begin to loosen? Relationships feel different. Goals you once chased no longer excite you. Matériel désir fade. The need for external validation weakens. You start craving truth, not comfort. This is the early phase of awakening, detachment without explanation. You may feel lost, restless, disoriented because you're no longer vibrating at the frequency of your past, and yet you're not fully anchored in your new frequency either. The number appears to stabilize you, to remind you this is not chaos. This is transformation. The real question, if 3 to 33 is showing up for you, if it's following you, if it appears at moments that feel charged, emotional, or meaningful, then the shift is already happening. Your consciousness has started rising whether you intended it or not. And once this process begins, it cannot be undone. Now, the question becomes, what is 333 trying to warn you about? By the time 333 begins appearing regularly, your soul is already speaking loudly, but your everyday mind hasn't caught up yet. Most people think repeating numbers are comforting signs, little messages of encouragement. And yes, sometimes they are, but 333 is different. It doesn't show up when everything is fine. It appears when something crucial in your life requires immediate awareness. 333 is not just a sign, it is a warning, a nudge from your higher self saying, wake up now, something in your reality needs to change. You may not know what that something is yet, but your deeper consciousness knows exactly what you're avoiding. Because 333 appears at the crossroads of two timelines, the one you're living and the one you were meant to live. When you repeatedly see 333, it means you're drifting away from your highest path and your higher self is pulling you back before it's too late. The moment you're trying to ignore, your higher self knows you better than your conscious mind ever could. It sees the patterns you repeat. It sees the lies you tell yourself to stay comfortable. It sees the fears you hide under logic. It sees the truth behind the people you trust, the choices you justify, and the illusions you cling to. 333 appears when you're staying in a situation your soul has outgrown, you're ignoring intuitive red flags, you're betraying your inner truth to please others, you're resisting a change that your spirit is pushing toward, you're shrinking yourself to fit an old version of your life. Your mind may deny these things. Your ego may argue. Your emotions may resist, but your higher self does not negotiate. So it uses the one language you can't ignore. Synchronicity, the call to alignment. Most people live controlled by external forces, opinions, expectations, conditioning, but your higher self lives above all of that. It doesn't care about social approval, comfort, routine, or fear. It cares about alignment. When 333 appears, it means the gap between your life and your soul is widening. This is why so many people report feeling uneasy when they see 333. It's not a bad sign, it's a truthful one. Your higher self is confronting you with the life you are not living. Sometimes the message is gentle, sometimes it's urgent, but it is always deliberate, because 333 is the number of course correction. The emotional tension you feel is a message. Have you noticed that 333 appears more frequently during emotional conflict? Moments when you're unsure, moments when you feel stuck, moments when you're pretending everything is fine, moments when you're about to repeat an old pattern, moments when you're betraying your intuition. This is not coincidence. Your higher self doesn't send signs when you're aligned, it sends signs when you're misaligned. It is reminding you, you are not meant to continue as you are. People who ignore 333 often stay trapped in cycles for years longer than necessary, repeating the same pain, the same relationships, the same anxieties, the same disappointments. Not because life is punishing them, but because they refuse to acknowledge the whisper inside, this is not your path anymore. The question 333 asks you, every time 333 appears, it is silently asking, what truth are you avoiding? What part of your life no longer matches who you've become? What fear is blocking your next evolution? And most importantly, will you listen this time? If 3 to 33 is following you, your higher self is not trying to comfort you. It is trying to awaken you. If ancient civilizations revered 333 as a sacred activation, modern power structures react to it with something very different. Fear. Not superstitious fear, strategic fear. Because people who notice synchronicities are people who begin waking up, and nothing threatens a control system more than a human being who starts to question their reality. For thousands of years, empires, religions, governments, and institutions have relied on one thing above all else: your unconsciousness. As long as you remain unaware of your true power, they remain powerful. But the moment you begin awakening even slightly, the entire structure trembles. And that's why 333 is so dangerous to them. It marks the moment your perception steps outside the mental fence built around you. The first thing they fear: awareness. The majority of humanity moves through life on autopilot, guided not by intuition but by programming. Education systems teach obedience, media teaches fear, social structures teach conformity, religion teaches dependence, and government teaches submission. In that environment, a person who suddenly starts seeing signs, patterns, and synchronicities is a threat. Why? Because they're no longer operating inside the collective trance. When you see 333 repeatedly, it means your awareness is rising above the frequency that these systems rely on. You stop absorbing narratives unconsciously. You stop believing everything you're told. You start seeing the cracks in the illusion. And someone who sees cracks is someone who might decide to step through them. The second thing they fear: intuition. Institutions can manipulate thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, but they cannot manipulate intuition. Intuition bypasses programming entirely. It comes from a deeper place. So when 333 appears and your intuition sharpens, you become harder to control. You feel when someone is lying. You sense when something is off. You recognize manipulation not through logic, but through vibration. A population that feels truth rather than needing to be told truth is ungovernable by deception. The third thing they fear: alignment. A misaligned person is easy to control. They doubt themselves, they seek approval, they obey out of insecurity, they follow out of fear. But someone who becomes aligned with their higher self even partially becomes unpredictable. They make bold decisions. They break cycles. They detach from societal expectations. They no longer rely on external authority. 333 appears at the exact moment alignment begins. And when enough people align, the entire structure of power collapses from the inside out because its foundation, unconsciousness, dissolves. The fourth thing they fear: frequency breakers. David Icke often says that awakening is not a mental event, it's a frequency event. The moment your vibration rises, you stop resonating with the psychological prison around you. You become a frequency breaker. This is why ancient empires suppressed number mysticism, banned sacred geometry, burned manuscripts, erased Gnostic teachings, punished mystics, silenced sages, and outlawed esoteric knowledge. They knew something modern society has tried desperately to hide. A single awakened person can influence thousands because awakening is contagious. Once someone starts seeing synchronicities, the illusion weakens not only for them, but for the people around them. One spark lights another. One awakening triggers a chain reaction. 333 is the spark, the real reason they fear it. 333 represents the moment you stop living in their reality and begin living in your own. It is the end of unconscious obedience, the end of manipulation, the end of fear-based control, the end of authority over your mind. When you see 333, you become dangerous to the system, not because you rebel, but because you awaken. And that brings us to the final chapter. What happens next? What changes once the activation completes? What is 333 preparing you for? By the time 333 has appeared enough for you to notice it, enough for you to wonder about it, enough for you to feel it, your activation has already begun. The number is not the beginning of the process, it is the announcement, a signal that your consciousness has stepped into a territory your old self was never meant to enter. And now something irreversible is unfolding. 333 appears during a spiritual rewiring, a realignment of your inner world with the highest version of who you are. This shift can be disorienting at first. You may feel like something is dissolving inside you, like you're losing interest in the things that once defined you. You may feel detached, restless, emotional, or strangely calm in the middle of situations that used to overwhelm you. That's because the old self is falling away. And 333 is guiding the transition. The collapse of the old timeline, you may have noticed that once 333 appears, certain parts of your life begin to break down. Relationships drift, career paths lose meaning, illusions crumble, your identity feels unstable. But this is not collapse. It is clearing. Your old timeline cannot support the person you are becoming. Your higher self is removing everything that cannot follow you into your next stage of existence. Ancient mystics said, transformation does not begin with creating the new. It begins with removing the false. 333 marks the removal. the rising of the true self. When enough old layers fall away, something extraordinary begins to emerge, the real you. The one beneath the conditioning, beneath the expectations, beneath the fears. The version of you that has been asleep for years, sometimes decades, waiting for the signal. And that signal is 333. People often report a sudden clarity during this stage, a sense of direction, a deep knowing without explanation, an emotional lightness, an unshakable connection to intuition, a feeling of being guided instead of lost. This is the moment when you step out of the program world and into your authentic one. You stop asking for permission. You stop doubting yourself. You stop shrinking to fit old narratives. You begin to live from consciousness rather than conditioning. The multiplication of signs, once the activation begins, 333 rarely appears alone. You may start seeing11点11分、1点11分、4点44分、5点55分、22点22分、12点12分. This means your awareness is syncing with the deeper architecture of reality. You are no longer a passive participant. You are a conscious creator within the simulation. And the simulation is responding to you. Synchronicities accelerate. Opportunities appear. People who match your new frequency enter your life. People who match your old frequency quietly exit. You begin attracting what aligns with your soul, not your fears. The final purpose of 333. So what is 333 ultimately preparing you for? A shift into a higher timeline where your intuition, awareness, and inner truth guide your life. You are becoming someone the old world cannot easily control. You are remembering your power. You are returning to yourself. And 333 is the bridge between who you were and who you are finally becoming. This is why it appears. This is why you cannot ignore it. This is why everything in your life feels like it's changing. You're not losing anything. You're awakening. Must subscribe to watch more videos.